Welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed the film. And if you are just joining us, my name is Ria Vedro, and I am the Director of Community Engagement at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And we are so thrilled to be with you tonight for our virtual program, Meditations on the Power of Community, which is co-presented by the Gardner Museum, Pao Arts Center, and Lenora Lee Dance. This program is offered in conjunction with the Gardner's current exhibition, Shen Wei, Painting in Motion, which will be up here at the museum on view through June 20th, 2021. I want to thank our collaborators at the Boston Asian American Film Festival and Arts Emerson, and also to give a very special thank you tonight to the co-curators of the Shen Wei Painting in Motion exhibition, Peggy Fogelman, our Gardner Museum Norma Jean Calderwood director, and Pirana Cavalchini, the Tom and Lisa Blumenthal curator of contemporary art, for their incredible support with this project. So before we begin, we would like to mention that the Gardner Museum is an inclusive place that welcomes everyone. So to have the best experience today, you're going to want to use the chat and the Q&A functions to continue our conversation. And please remember to take care of yourself and each other during our limited and wonderful time together. A live transcript is available during this program at the bottom of your screen, and that will provide closed captioning. You will notice that the full biographies, and links will be shared throughout the night via the chat. If you have any questions or technical difficulties, please use the chat function. We have support staff monitoring the chat who can assist you. If you have questions for our panelists or would like to share comments, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce to you one of the stars of the show tonight is our moderator for this panel, Susan Chinson, who is the creative producer at Arts Emerson and the establishing director of the Boston Asian American Film Festival. It is my great honor to hand over the floor to Susan. Welcome, Susan.
Hi, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Rhea. I'm so excited to be here this evening to talk about this amazing collaboration around meditations on the power of community inspired by the exhibit Shen Wei Painting in Motion. I am moderating today's panel from the unceded land of the Wampanoag and Massachusetts people, now known as Quincy. And I invite any of you who'd like to share where you're joining us from today to please pop that into the chat as well as any other comments you may be having during the panel this evening. I'm so excited to really be here because this recognizes a culmination of a lot of parts of my life that are happening here and intersecting tonight. I've known Lenora Lee for a number of years now from my prior years at the Chinese Historical Society of New England, and now with my work at Arts Emerson, where she has been doing a residency with us over this pandemic time. I'm so excited about the partnership with the Pao Arts Center, which I'm a huge fan of, and to be here tonight to sort of bring all of that and the history together in one place is an amazing collaboration that I'm truly inspired by. I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists this evening and would like you to help me welcome the four of them. Our first panelist is Olivia Huang, who is an award-winning filmmaker, and Lenora Lee, artistic director of Lenora Lee Dance, Paul W. Lee, retired partner at Goodwin Procter and board president of the Asian Community Development Corporation, as well as a longtime community advocate. And certainly last but not least, we have Cynthia Wu, director of the Pao Arts Center at the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. Welcome, everyone. For our first question, I'm just going to start with Cynthia, really being at the vertex of where all the intersections happened around this piece. Can you please tell us about the Pao Arts Center and the role of Pao in this piece?
Thank you, Susan, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Cynthia. I am the director of Pao Arts Center. This collaboration actually began quite a while ago, more than 18 months ago. The Gardner Museum team came to talk to me actually at Pao Arts Center, and we began talking about some of the themes of this upcoming Shen Wei exhibit, which included meditation, mark making, and the idea about dreamscapes. And we started thinking about where there could be intersections to collaborate. For those of you that are new or new to Pao Arts Center and are hearing about us for the first time, a lot of our work is about how we can strengthen and celebrate and connect Asian and Asian American artists and community members and uplift our community stories. So together with the Gardner team, we started talking about this concept, especially about mark making that is so prevalent in the Shen Wei exhibit, and not thinking about it more so much in a literal sense, like a painting, putting marks on a canvas, but we really started thinking about it more conceptually. How community members have been fighting or looking to leave their mark or leave impact on a neighborhood for so many years to make their vision of their community come to life. And then we thought this was an actual really interesting way to develop a program, because we also knew that Shen Wei, he's an international artist from China. He doesn't have a connection to Boston Chinatown. So we wanted to be creative about how we created a jumping off point to talk about Boston Chinatown and this community stories. At the same time, we've been working with Lenora Lee Dance from San Francisco for a few years to conceptualize a piece, a multimedia immersive piece at Pao Arts Center, and really about telling the story of Chinatown through many media. So this seemed like a good fit to collaborate. And like I said, we started talking in early 2020, it might have been the end of 2019. And then when the pandemic hit, we really had to shift gears. So when we started thinking about how to do a film or a virtual version of this, we also at Pao Arts Center, we work with local filmmaker Olivier Huang on a couple of projects. So when this moment for collaboration began, it seemed like a really nice way to change format, but also bring a local filmmaker together with an artist who's not based in Boston, but a national artist, and kind of using the inspiration of international artists. So it became a really dynamic and interesting project. And I think more importantly, a way for us to really shed light on the community stories to a larger audience that we have at the Gardner Museum at Arts Emerson, our partner for one of our partners for tonight, and really celebrate these stories that a lot of people don't know about. I want to share one story with you to tell a little bit more about Pao Arts Center, but the story of how the center came about is really also a form of community fighting to redevelop a piece of land that was taken away. We are located on Hudson Street, the very street that both Paul Lee and Cynthia Yee talk about in the film. And it was developed by the Asian Community Development Corporation, the building we're in, as a mixed-use community space and affordable housing unit. And so it was really just having this cultural hub is a really act of celebration of the power of the people in this community that have been fighting for so long. And I wanted to also add that this story is not singular to Boston's Chinatown, this idea of displacements of resilience. We see it in many neighborhoods in Boston, but also we see it in many neighborhoods in Chinatowns or Asian affiliated spaces across the nation and even internationally. I just want to close by looking at the future and talking, Lydia Lowe in the film talks about the Chinatown Land Trust and community members fighting to preserve spaces. But, we also have Asian Community Development Corporation working to represent community needs in development of affordable housing, for example. And there's actually parcels of land near Pao Arts Center, specifically R1, that are up for development now. So I think the near future provides a lot of opportunities and exciting moments for the Boston Chinatown community.
Oh, that's amazing, Cynthia. And thank you so much for the POW sort of holding the space down to uplift these types of stories and bringing artists and community together, especially in such a significant space. And before we hear more from filmmaker Olivia and a little bit more from Paul and his perspective. I'd like to take a moment now to actually turn to Lenora, who has brought a lot of her artistic vision to this project. And I'm hoping you can share with our audiences tonight, Lenora, briefly about your body of work and what role this piece plays within it.
Sure. It's been really great to work on this project, and I just wanted to share a little bit more about the work that I do. It's been predominantly dance performance based, so large scale performance within a theater, sometimes site specifically in historic locations, outdoors. And a lot of it has been integrating video projection, so as multimedia performance, immersive performance, where audience members and the dancers are in close proximity to one another. So I think what's been exciting about this process is that I've been asking the question continually throughout my artistic career: how can we more deeply connect with audience members and with the viewers? And how can we uncover different layers of experiences that various different communities have gone through? So a lot of my work is research-based. There's been quite a bit on Chinese immigration to the United States. I've done pieces on incarceration and the violence of war, gender inequality. And so for this particular piece, it was really about me getting to know members of Boston's Chinatown and to be able to share about the resilience of the community, the activism that's taken place. And so for this particular project, you heard from some key members of the community, those who have grown up and lived in Chinatown, as well as those who have worked and fought for the rights of the community and for resources. So with my work, I like to have a variety of different artistic modes and mediums to tell the story: dance, original music by Tatsuo Aoki, who you heard, and also a layer of visual storytelling through video and film. Integrating with that are the stories layered through interviews and research. So I wanted to share also that I grew up in San Francisco and amongst the Chinatown community there. And really I'm a third generation Chinese American, a descendant of family members who came over during the Chinese exclusion era. So I witnessed firsthand all around the repercussions of that, which is really the first piece of legislation that limited anyone from another country from immigrating and nationalizing here. And so a lot of folks don't know that this set precedent for a lot of the immigration laws to come, and that really has affected generations and generations here. So I feel like this was a really important opportunity for artists, arts organizations, and community organizations to come together and collaborate on this very unique experience of integrating a combination of documentary film and kind of experimental dance film. And to be able to share this layer of truth, I think that is not very well and widely known. And I think part of this is about providing voice and an opportunity, a window into the experiences, specifically of Boston Chinatown, but I think they resonate throughout the country. Yeah, and it was a really wonderful partnership and opportunity to work with the Gardner Museum, Pao Arts Center, in the creation of the film and the screening, and also with the support of Arts Emerson and the Boston Asian American Film Festival for the screening of Projecting Connections, where we were a part of that film series last week. So thank you. Thanks so very much.
No, and congratulations to you. It really turned out to be a wonderful project, and your vision for it is really beautiful. And we're so thankful that you've been able to come to Boston to share your work with us. And it looks like you have found a wonderful partner with Olivia in creating this piece. And so Olivia, I'd like to actually turn this over to you. I'm recognizing this is a beautiful integration of many aspects of art. And it includes a lot of disciplines, spaces, themes, and stories. Could you please share with us some of the techniques that you use to create cohesion in this piece?
Okay. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Susan, and good evening, everyone. My name is Weiying Olivia Huang. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I hope you all enjoy the film. There are many things working behind the scenes, especially on the post-production and editing. I would like to share some use of color and tones in the visual storytelling in the film. As you may have noticed some of the color changing through the film between black and white and color. These color palettes were chosen to emphasize the narrative storytelling, black and white for the past tense, reddish and gold to the power of present, green and blue to the sadness. The present tense is a style in the opening scenes that dances red costume against the backdrop of Shen Wei's golden canvas. And these same golden panel that lead into the next scenes create a balance between color and composition and continue in the music sequence. This warm color symbolizes life, love, power, and energy. As the dancers perform against the backdrop, it is beautiful. I think the choreography did a wonderful job of connecting the painting together. To match the community members' voice and experience of Chinatown, the black and white were used to stress the individual story of a private memory, showing the seriousness and darkness of the Chinese exclusion act. So, as a native of China, this is my first time I have learned of the exclusion act, and it is hard to believe that law such as exclusion act have existed. I think this made it especially urgent to tell this story and draw attention to anti-Asian hate in the current issue, and hope that such a history would never be repeated. And later in the film, after black and white photo of the Yi's family, the narrative addressed the subject of the shadow of left behind sibling. There is a color tone in green and blue, indicate sadness and depression. Some of them, when you watch the film, you may not know the color and tone change, but when the color and tone change, the film means that they have some the mood and feeling or location and concept have been changed. So as the film tells the story between past and present, the color return to the street of Chinatown in warmer tone. So probably most of the audience doesn't notice that as well. And it's so inspiring to see so many individuals and organizations work and build a community's future. As a documentary filmmaker, I'm thinking of setting my next project in Boston, Chinatown. I'm honored to have been involved in meditations on the power of community. Work with Lenora Lee on the dance sequence was a wonderful experience. And finally, thanks to Gardner Museum, Pao Arts Center, and Lenora Lee to bring this project together. And also special thanks to Arts Emerson for having us here.
Thank you, Olivia. That was really a beautiful film that you've put together, and we're so excited to have been featuring it here and having your talents showcased in the film. We know that this was based upon personal experiences, and one of the stories that was highlighted in the film was that of Paul Lee's. Paul being a longtime community advocate and pillar in the community. Paul, I would love for you to share with audiences more about your experiences featured in the film and your reaction to it, you know, especially including why this history is important and why now.
Well, thank you, Susan. And thank you, Lenora and Olivia, for this beautiful film. And thank you, Olivia, for the explanation of what you were trying to accomplish I could feel it, but I didn't know the technical aspects. So thank you. You know, for me, the peaceful beauty of Shen Wei's art kind of provides an interesting contrast to the grittiness, but also the vibrancy of Chinatown as shown in the photographs. The film really animates for me the connection between the buildings and places and the people who live and work in Chinatown, as well as their hopes and aspirations. When most people think of Chinatown, they think of restaurants and they think of tourism, the economic engines that drive Chinatown, which have suffered so greatly during the pandemic. But Chinatown is also about the residents, many of whom are immigrants. And watching the movement of the dancers in the film makes me think of how much movement was required of the immigrants for them to come all the way here from Asia, half a world away. And Chinatown has always been a community of that new immigrants, like my parents, come to when they first arrive in this country. They come here to be with people of a familiar and shared culture. They come here to be safe, which has taken on added importance in the current climate of violence against Asian Americans. And they come here to gain access to much needed services, to find affordable housing, jobs, assistance in immigration status, and opportunities to learn English. All of which are necessary on the path toward realizing the American dream, which for my father meant a lifetime of working in Chinese restaurants and my mother working as a garment worker in sewing factories, so that their 3 kids could go to college and have successful careers in electric power management, law, and web design. And as Susan and Cynthia mentioned, I've been involved with ACDC, Asian Community Development Corporation, since its founding almost 40 years ago, and I'm currently the board president. And it was particularly satisfying to me that 2 of the affordable housing projects that we built, one on Hudson Street and one on Nassau Street, are on sites where I used to live when I was growing up. But for me, the art, the dance, the speakers, and the photographs all come together in this beautiful film to give me inspiration for our work in trying to preserve Chinatown, to provide more affordable housing, to preserve the neighborhoods for the residents, and to hold on to the sense of community. And this sense of community is vitally important now because we need to look after each other, especially our elders and our children, in the face of anti-Asian attacks that are sadly and constantly in the news during these times. So thank you for giving me a chance to share these thoughts with you. And as you can see, this film brings up a lot of emotions for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Actually, if I could our first question is actually tied a little bit to the end part of their, speaking of now, given the rise in anti-Asian hate and xenophobia, how do you see stories, sort of community stories playing a role in sort of helping to create power?
The stories help us to overcome the invisibility that we all feel that our community has been subject to. All of us in our careers, when we were in school, when we were bullied by our classmates, we've all felt invisible. But if we come together and share stories, I think we reinforce each other. And then we also, as we learn more about Asian American history, it gives us a sense of pride in how far we and our ancestors have come. And hopefully it'll help educate the general public about the fact that Asians are not perpetual foreigners.
No, thank you. And I remember the first time I took my first Asian American Studies course, and that was so important to me. And I recognize there's actually some legislation that is now going through Massachusetts state legislation to include ethnic studies in the curriculum of K through 12. So very, very important. Did you have something else to add?
Well, I think it's interesting that a lot of the activism we're seeing among the youth, the high school youth, are high school youth in the suburbs who are really pushing for adding Asian American history to the history curriculum. They're doing it on the local level, and then they're also supporting the legislation that's at the State House now.
Great. It is wonderful to see the next generation stepping up and taking a lead in this, especially where it's really needed. On the next question we have coming in, actually, I'm going to pose this to Lenora. Would you please share with us how you collaborated together as storytellers? Like, how did you end up weaving all these stories together and sort of your vision for that?
Sure. So I met both you, Susan, and Cynthia several years back in planning a larger project in Boston that had to do with more extensive research on Boston Chinatown. And so it was in January of 2020, right before the pandemic, where I had the opportunity to interview about 14 people on my trip to Boston at that time. And there was something that was saying, interview as many people as you can. I just had this gut feeling. And fortunately in that trip, I was able to interview 14 people, and then the pandemic hit. So interestingly, originally this was supposed to be a performance that was to be hosted live inside the Gardner Museum. And so throughout the early part of the pandemic, we considered many different options and ended up with the film version of this project, which contains some of the interviews that I had done in January of 2020. And so it was the first time working with Olivia, and I think it was really a wonderful coming together of various different connections and resources here, because Olivia and Cynthia had worked together before through Pao Arts Center projects. And this was the first time I was working with the 3 Boston dancers featured in the film. And so we did in-person and virtual auditions in January through March of 2020, and then worked both remotely and on a major trip last December. So it's been an interesting process maneuvering through the pandemic. And I saw a question here, did the pandemic or recent events involving anti-Asian sentiments inspire parts of the project? And I feel like they were inherent in the creation of it because we were living through it. And, I remember having conversations with the dancers who were dealing with discrimination on a daily basis. And it's interesting because every day I ask myself, can I wear my sandals or should I wear my sneakers out? Because am I going to have to defend myself on the street? And I think it's a really difficult and challenging time to have to consider something like that, or consider, are my parents going to be okay when they go to the grocery store? So I think it's thick in the minds and the hearts of so many right now, and something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And it just kind of permeates. Yeah.
Great. And maybe would you also share a bit, you mentioned that this is part of a larger project that you've been working on with those 14 interviews, and sort of where you're headed with that, and if that involves the POW as well.
Sure, yes. So what we're hoping to do is, and what we've been planning for the last few years, is to create a performance piece that's generated specifically to be performed inside and outside of the Pao Arts Center, and to feature more community voices, as well as more dancers. So the hope was to bring more San Francisco dancers out to collaborate with the Boston dancers. This is something that we've been planning for several years. And so fortunately, we're being supported by Arts Emerson through a residency to create this larger project, along with several other national funders to be able to create this. And we're hoping that we can still create an outdoor performance version of it, but also thinking realistically, and thinking that maybe a full-length experimental dance film could be a possible outcome for that particular piece. But the exciting thing is that we will get to collaborate in a more extensive way in the future, in the very near future. And we're hoping to be more integrated within the Boston community and work together more extensively.
That's really fantastic. And I loved hearing about all the pivots. You know, everyone's been talking about pivots that they're having to do during this pandemic. And you really have managed to adapt what would have been a piece that solely would have been in the Gardner only to a piece that now will continue to live, as I understand, online on the Gardner's YouTube page and others to be able to share indefinitely along, hopefully with this conversation as well. So I hope that as you progress and we figure out what happens in the next year to see, we're looking really forward to seeing what Convergent Waves brings to us from you.
Thanks. Can I just say one other thing? That the exciting part of that one also is that we will be able to take it on tour as a live performance to San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York City. So that's part of the project, and we're thrilled to be able to work with different communities in those cities as well.
That's great. I know you've got a great fan base in each of those. So I'm sure people will be looking forward to seeing this from you as well. So before we end our time today, I would like to share some resources, given this is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and just recognizing that there's a tremendous amount of history about Boston's Chinatown that we were not able to share here, and that if folks are looking for ways to support the community at this time, we'll be sharing a number of them in the links, I think in the chat here, as well as they will be emailed to you in a follow-up email following this conversation. But you can find more information about the Chinatown Atlas, read more about from Cynthia Yi from her Hudson Street Chronicles, a Chinatown Banquet, which is a documentary on the history of Boston's Chinatown made by youth. There's a number of other ones, including an Asian American Pacific Islander Community Relief Fund, and ways in which you can support Chinatown businesses in Boston during this pandemic time. And I'd also just like to recognize some of the organizations featured in the film: the Asian Community Development Corporation, the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center, the Chinese Progressive Association, and the Chinatown Land Trust. So with that, I would like to extend a very heartfelt thanks to our panelists today for this wonderful conversation that really shed so much light behind this beautiful piece of work connected to Shen Wei's. I'd like to thank Olivia, Lenora, Paul, and Cynthia for sharing your experiences with us. And I'd also like to thank the Gardner Museum for hosting today's conversation. With that said, I'd like to welcome Rhea back to close out this conversation.
Thank you. Oh, it's been such a gift to hear all of these incredible and powerful community voices lifted up through this process. And I just want to thank you, Olivia and Lenora, Paul and Cynthia, our community collaborators at the Pao Arts Center, Lenora Lee Dance, and for tonight's program, Arts Emerson, and all of you, most of all, for being present with us here for this virtual program and participating in this conversation. As was mentioned a moment ago, there are links being added to the chat. So please do check those out. That will give you information not only about the community organizations, but also about our Shen Wei exhibition. Shen Wei Painting in Motion has several upcoming virtual programs that we hope you will join us for as well. And I just want to say in closing, as we're wrapping up here, this exhibition has at its core, the Shen Wei exhibition, this idea of mark making and meditative dreamscapes. And this opportunity to share the voices of people who are making marks on our Boston Chinatown community, as well as the San Francisco and other Chinatown communities, as a really beautiful metaphor. And dreamscapes is something that runs through this painting painting and dance exhibition that we have here at the Gardner. And we really see how hearing about the dreams of our local community members is, it's just a tiny snippet, but it's been such a gift. So please do come back again and again to the Gardner Museum, come back to watch the video on our YouTube channel of the full film, as well as tonight's presentation. Just as a reminder, our Shen Wei Painting in Motion exhibition is up through June 20th, 2021. And you can purchase a time ticket on our website, gardnermuseum.org, or use the link that you'll see right now in your chat. So thank you again to our curators, Peggy and Pirana. Thank you to our amazing panelists and artists who participated in tonight's program. Have a wonderful night, and thank you so much for joining us.